Good morning, everyone.
Recorded.
And welcome to Your Overseas Home virtual event. Thank you for joining us this morning and for tuning into our session on buying property in France. My name is Richard Way. I'm an international property journalist and I'm a writer on the Property Guides team, and I'll be hosting this session. Just a quick bit of background information about Your Overseas Home. So we're a service provider and we've been helping people buy property and relocate for over 10 years now, not just in France, but in other popular destinations around the world. So we provide valuable resources and crucially, we connect you with the right people who can help you make a success of your purchase or relocation to France. They're trusted specialists in the market. And we're lucky to have three of them here today on the panel who are going to share their knowledge and experience in different aspects of the buying process. Just quickly, I'll do a quick introduction. We've got Sally Dilks from Buckles Solicitors. Hi, Sally.
Hi.
Give us a wave. Hi.
Good morning.
We've got James Rolt from Beau Village Immobilier, who's based out in the Charente. And we've got Paul Harris from Smart Currency Exchange. And you're in London today. Hi, Paul.
Morning, everyone.
So we'll come back to them in a minute. But just to say, this session is being recorded. So if you want to revisit it after today, you can have a look on the Your Overseas Home website. I think it's going up on Monday. If you need to check anything that's said today or you want to forward it to friends and family and share the knowledge, it'll be there. The session's going to be about an hour. So what I'll do is I'll let each of the panelists do a quick introduction in a minute, and then we're going to go and speak to each of them individually. I've got some questions to ask them. The idea is to cover off all the main points that we think you should be thinking about, or you should know about when you to help you prepare for your property purchase in France. But if you have any questions that spring to mind during the session, do type them into the Q&A tool, which you can see on the dashboard, and then I'll channel them to the right, the appropriate panelist. And then I'm going to leave about 10 minutes towards the end as well, just to have more questions, and we can revisit anything that we think we need to address. So what else do I need to say? That's it, really. So what I'd like to do is just quickly ask each of them to say a 1-minute intro, who they are, what services you offer, and a bit about your personal experience of the country that you're working in as well, or in Paul's case, it's currency. So start with you, Paul. Hi, Paul. Tell us about yourself and your experience working in the currency industry.
Morning, Richard, and good morning, everyone. So, as Richard said, I'm here representing Smart Currency this morning. Personally, I've worked in the foreign exchange industry for over 10 years now, and I've been with Smart for 8.5 of those. Over that time, we've helped hundreds and thousands of people help move money internationally primarily for property purchases. And France is a major country for us. Obviously, lots of Brits wanting to relocate or purchase in France. Where we really assist you and are of benefit for you in the process is we're going to take all the stress and as much risk as possible out of the actual currency exchange process, and make sure it's a smooth process and not something you need to be getting stressed about.
Thanks, Paul. And main office is London, isn't it?
Yeah, we have main offices Hammersmith, London, where I am now. Yeah. And
I think it's worth saying as well, Smart's worked with Beau Village for a long time, isn't it? There's quite an established relationship there. So, you know, clients who are Beau Village clients or clients who are Smart, there, you know, there's a nice partnership there. What is it, about 15 years or something, I think? So,
must be, yeah. It was already well established when I joined. So it's a very long time.
Great, thanks very much. Hi, Sally. Just tell us about yourself and Buckles.
Hi, everybody. Buckles is a full service law firm with offices across the UK. I joined 10 years ago to set up the French law team. What differentiates us from the majority of UK law firms, I would say, is that we've got quite a large international department where we have lawyers who are dedicated to advising on French, Spanish and Italian law. I'm joined by two French colleagues, and we're all bilingual and have qualifications in both English and French law. And I've been advising clients on buying and selling property in France since the very early 2000s, working in various different places. And I've also lived in France. I did a law with French degree initially many moons ago. And then about 20 years ago, I lived in Paris, and I did a master's in French property and construction law and worked in Paris as well. So love France, always have, love the language, and really fascinated by the law. So we're here to help you with your buying queries and the buying process, and help you for things to go smoothly.
Thank you very much. Arguably the most fortunate of us today, because he's in France, living in France. James, how you doing?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. So, I moved to France about 16 years ago, and I previously studied French and history at university, so I got a degree in French. And we moved over here when our eldest daughter was literally just being born, so we made the move and kind of jumped in with both feet. Originally, we set up our own independent estate agency, which we ran for about 15 years. Which was successful. And just last year, we merged with Beauvalage, because Beauvalage estate agents are kind of growing. We started off in the sort of southwest of France, and sort of going slowly up the country. So now we're part of a much bigger network of about 20 offices, covering really quite a wide area. And that gives us access to, much bigger sort of marketing possibilities, but also, kind of great opportunities for our clients, because we have many more properties to offer them. And I think that the market has been particularly strong in the last couple of years since COVID, and it's carrying on for the time being. So we're helping hundreds and hundreds of people, all the time to either relocate to France or to move within France. So that's where we are.
Right. Have you always been in the Charente?
Yeah, always been literally not in the same house, but we moved a couple of times. But yeah, always in this area.
Okay. Oh, great. So you've got lots of local knowledge of the area now. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, let's look at currency. Paul, for a lot of people watching, first time they ever need to send large amounts of money to France or anywhere abroad is when they come to buy a house abroad in France or relocate. And often the first thought is you go to your bank, but obviously we say, no, stop. There's people better equipped out there to help you make international transfers, people like Smart Currency Exchange. Just tell us what the main differences are and the benefits that you offer over banks, people moving large sums abroad.
Yeah, I think the banks are, like you said, are always one of the first port of calls for anyone moving money internationally or moving money at all, because that's who you obviously ultimately trust. I think when it comes to using the banks in comparison to ourselves, there is no real comparison. It's the benefits of using ourselves over a bank are quite significant. So I'll explain why. Ultimately, the cost is going to be more. It's more cost effective to use a brokerage like ourselves, and we can achieve a much more cost effective exchange rate for you. But the service we can offer you is where you're really going to benefit. So I'll give you an example. If you were walk into your bank today, talk to an account manager or a bank teller about exchange rates, what I need to move X amount of money over to France to buy a property, they'll just look at the screen, you'll get an exchange rate, and that's the rate you get. It's not going to be a very competitive exchange rate, and it will only be available on a spot contract basis. So a spot contract is essentially a contract that you book today, pay today, and the money's moved immediately. So it doesn't give you any flexibility, and you're just stuck with that exchange rate. Where we differ is we offer a sort of suite of different products. So we do offer the spot contracts. That's absolutely it's a very popular product. We do spot contracts all the time. But for property purchases, the most popular product that we have is a forward contract. So easiest way to explain a forward contract and how it benefits is if you are in France, you find a property. You will agree the price in euros. So that price in euros is fixed. You've agreed that price. You've signed a contract, etc. You know exactly how much you need to send. What will be constantly changing is how much it's actually going to cost you in pound sterling or whatever currency you currently hold. So that's where a forward contract can really help you out. So you can obviously, if you have your price agreed, whenever you're happy with the exchange rate, we can fix it for a future date. So you don't have to pay for the full contract straight away. And we can essentially hold that exchange rate for you until the time of completion and you actually need the funds over. So it gives you full peace of mind that you've got your price in euros fixed and then your price in pound sterling fixed as well. So your costs are completely protected. Doesn't matter what happens in the market, that price is guaranteed for you. There are other options as well. If the exchange rate isn't quite where you want it to be at the time, we can put orders into the market for you as well. So we can actually keep an eye on the exchange rates, and when a certain rate is hit, we can transfer for you. That's no guarantee that we'll be able to do it. We still have to work on the live market, but again, gives you a little bit more flexibility to actually aim for a slightly higher exchange rate and work within your budget. But as I mentioned, the service is paramount. Again, using the same example, you may be speaking to someone in a bank that has zero experience of foreign exchange. Again, they might just be looking at the price on the screen. You are, once you're registered, you have one point of contact. So you have your account manager. They will essentially hold your hand as much as you need to. Throughout the whole process, they'll make sure they're explaining everything very clearly to you and ultimately try and time the transfer at the best point for you, again, making it as cost effective as possible. So yeah, in comparison to the bank, there are a lot of benefits to using ourselves.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more of a you're giving them guidance. You'll formulate a strategy. You'll understand exactly what they're trying to achieve in terms of timescales. And the guys in your team, they understand the process that's involved. They're going to need to pay a deposit. They're going to need to sign a contract. They're going to need to complete. So those various points throughout the conveyancing process, money's going to need to be sent to France, and then you can sort of plot a strategy according to what they want to do, whether they want to forward buy some of it or half of it, which you won't get that at a bank. It'll be you go and you need to make a transaction, a bank will do it. That's it. And just on this, James, do you find a lot of your clients, when they first come to you, are they aware of the currency situation? Because it does add a whole new dimension to your purchase. You've got to think about two currencies and the effect that the exchange rate could have on your buying power.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably about 50-50. I'd say that some buyers that are very serious and ready to go generally have already thought about currency, because it's part and parcel of the kind of the bigger picture of buying a property, and it can make the difference of thousands of euros if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I'd say those that are kind of on the board and really kind of serious about moving or buying in France, they have already thought about it. They may not have actually gone through the process of doing anything more than that, but at least they've had that kind of initial sort of interaction with somebody. And then you get others who it just comes up, they actually make an offer on a property and they've not even thought it once about, currency exchange, everything else, because they're just used to dealing with the bank or whatever it might be. And then again, it's sort of our job to kind of guide and advise people as best we can to put them in touch with professionals that can help them. Because like I say, we had a deal last year where the buyer was going to transfer his money via his local bank and actually contacted Smart for his currency, and the difference in terms of the overall pound sterling price that you paid, it was thousands of pounds difference, and you just can't believe it. You've got to really think it through and sort of talk to the right people, because it's really important.
Yeah, and like you said, a small movement or a small difference in the rate you're going to get when you escalate that over a transaction worth hundreds of thousands, it becomes a difference of thousands of euros or thousands of sterling in your cost, which could be the cost of a new bathroom or something, if you think about it in practical terms. Okay, and you've got an online service as well. Is that right? Smart Currency Exchange. Yeah, so you can make transactions online.
Sorry.
I was going to say, a lot of people, for larger transactions, they'll probably like to speak to you and hear a voice on the end of the phone. But you do have the online.
For anything over £15,000, we think it's best to have that conversation with someone on the phone. But yeah, we have an online platform, and we also have a mobile app where you can do transactions up to 15,000, so the smaller ones, or maybe deposits. But we're always on hand to do any transaction size. We're not going to push people online we're happy to have the conversation, book any trade over the phone.
And when should clients start talking to you or opening an account? So no obligation account. So it sounds to me like you know it's something you can just do and have ready for when you do get to the point of needing to move money for a deposit or whatever.
Yeah, we'd always advise, as soon as it becomes a serious idea and plan to buy a property, it's best to speak to us. We can start helping you understand actual costs, how much you may need for certain price points in euros. But we've also, over the last 18 months, we've developed a whole new team now that deal with clients who may not be buying imminently, but maybe buying in the next year or two. So we have a dedicated team now that will deal with clients on a longer term basis. Again, just keeping you informed of what the markets are doing, have sort of bi-monthly check-ins just to see how things are progressing. But then also the benefit of having that team available to you is if things do suddenly change, you don't have to go through a registration process. You're all ready to go. Just give us a quick call and we can get on with whatever you need us to do.
Okay, and then the actual chain of how you make a transfer is obviously the client will fund their Smart account, moving sterling from their UK account into Smart segregated client account. Once that hits, then you can then you'll do the onward transfer of euros to the recipient in France, and you'll have already agreed the exchange rate. So it's that simple.
Yeah, it's really simple. You can pre-fund the account with us. You don't have to. So we only ask for funds, obviously, once we've booked a contract for you. And if it's a pound sterling one, we get the money pretty quickly, normally within 2 hours. And we can get the money into France the same or next working day. So it's a very quick process.
That's quicker than the banks sometimes, isn't it? It sounds like.
Yeah,
it's
very quick now that we can get money over there. Euros also, especially because we hold euro accounts in Europe now as well. So it speeds up the process for us.
Great. And just quickly, we've got a question. This ties in with my next question. Smart Currency Exchange, you don't charge fees for your transactions. The way you make your money is in the buying and selling of the currency at a wholesale level. And this is a question from someone who wants reassurance. He thinks it's a rude question. It's not a rude question. He says, how does Smart Currency Exchange make a profit? Do you want to just quickly say?
Yeah, so it's an absolutely fine question. We don't charge fees. We don't have any fees on top of our transactions. We obviously do make money as a business, and where we make the money. So you'll see online, if you're looking at exchange rates, that'll be called the interbank price or bank rates, whatever different people call it. That's where we'll be pretty much buying our currency at from the bank, and then we sell to you a slightly different rate, so slightly lower. We'd always be very transparent with exactly what rate you're getting, obviously, but we just make our money between the two. So where we've bought and where we've sold the currency. So there's no fee or costs to anyone moving money with us. We've already made the money when we convert the funds. So yeah, the question is absolutely fine. It's a question we get asked regularly because we don't charge fees, so people are interested. So it's absolutely fine.
It just shows you how much banks put on a premium when they pass it on to clients.
Yeah, they have a premium in the fees, and then they have a massive premium in the exchange rate. Yeah.
And the other thing we should probably mention is that you're regulated. How is clients' money? How are they protected?
So obviously, this security of funds is vitally important for us, and obviously the people, obviously our clients that transfer with us. We're fully regulated by the FCA. And governed by HMRC, so we're obviously fully fledged and licensed financial institution firm. Sorry. When you send money to us, goes into a client holding account, so it doesn't actually go into the Smart Currency accounts. We only take on the funds once the transaction is complete. So in the unlikely event that anything was to happen to Smart while we have your funds, they would just be returned in full back to the account that sent us the funds. So they're completely safeguarded.
Okay. And one final thing, it's not just the large transfers for the actual purchase of a property that you can help with. Obviously, you've got second homeowners are going to have bills to pay and spending money in their French bank account, or if you move over there, you're going to need a pension moved over on a monthly basis, and you can set up regular payment plans for that and then integrate forward contract as well, so people can fix an amount or they know what they're going to get each month?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Regular payment plan is incredibly popular. Again, if you move to France and you've got pensions that you need to move over, or if it's a holiday home and you have bills, we can set up a regular fixed amount that you'd need to transfer over, and we can fix an exchange rate for up to 24 months for that, so you know exactly how much it's going to cost or how much you'll end up in euros. We can do it variable or fixed. Fixed is very popular, but it's completely up to the decision maker of which way they want to go.
Great. Thanks very much for that introduction, Paul, to what Smart can do. Obviously, Smart have got a booth in the main exhibition hall, so you can go and find Paul and his colleagues afterwards if you've got other questions or you want to start using your account or set up your account. But that's great. Thank you, Paul. Let's turn to the legals now. Sally. Hi, Sally.
Hi.
You're there. Yeah. Before we get into the legal process and what's involved, is it fair to say that the French, I mean, I hear this said quite a lot, the French conveyancing process is actually quite transparent and buyer, it protects the buyer a bit more than in the UK where we have gazumping, and until you exchange, actually, it's a nice process to work in as a buyer.
Yeah, I would say on the whole, it's it's safe, it's secure. All French property is registered at the land registry. The system is different from the UK in the sense that in the UK, if you're buying a property, you have your offer accepted, and then your solicitor does all the pre-completion planning searches. You apply for a mortgage if you need to, and then you only exchange contracts once you've got the answers to all those questions. Whereas in France, you're signing that preliminary contract a lot earlier on in the process, which actually is good because it gives you and the seller peace of mind that you're bound into the transaction at an early point. And so there's a lot less scope, as you say, for gazumping. But because you're bound in at that early point, there are therefore lots of conditions in the contract to protect you as a buyer, because at that point you will not have obtained your mortgage offer if you need one. The notaire, so the lawyer in France, will not have done all the pre-completion searches and things. So there are lots of conditions in there to say that, yes, you're buying this property, but it's subject to you being able to get that mortgage offer for the amount you require by a certain date, subject to satisfactory results of local planning searches, subject to French local authorities or local agricultural boards sometimes not exercising a priority right to buy the property and all that sort of thing. So yes, I would say it's on the whole pretty secure and safe and binds you in earlier in the transaction. But on the other hand, it is a good idea to have somebody review all those documents for you who understands the French legal system, and to be able to explain what your responsibilities and obligations are.
Because obviously the French system, it's a notary system, so they have notaires.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's an added level of legal work here with your lawyer. Well, just explain how you fit into the equation, because a lot of people don't think they need independent legal advice. They can just use the notaires, but having extra protection,
so it's correct. There's absolutely no legal obligation to use an independent firm of solicitors like us, because the notaire in France is a legal professional, government appointed, and is there to do the pre-completion searches, draft the final deed of sale, collect the French registration taxes, stamp duty from the buyer, and then pay the capital gains tax to the seller. But it's unlike in the UK where each party has their own solicitor to represent them. In France, you have the one notaire usually dealing with the transaction. So they're not necessarily, of course, they're there to make sure the transaction is done properly and procedurally correctly, but they're not necessarily there looking out to advise you independently as a buyer. They're not necessarily going to explain to you all the different possibilities for structuring the ownership of the property. So we're here to add an extra level of protection. So if you instruct us, then we will be acting purely in your interest as the buyer, looking out for you, discussing with you any particular conditions of the purchase that are really key to you, and then making sure that those conditions are negotiated via the notaire, who will then liaise with the seller and the estate agency to make sure that everybody agrees on them and they're put properly in the contract. you know, and you're protected throughout. And we will also advise you on those ownership options so that we can have a look at your personal circumstances, who you would like to inherit the property from you should you die, and advise you on the best way of going about that as well.
Great. So it sounds like clients should be talking to you before they find a property, really, so that you can talk about well, they're prepared in the way it's going to be structured. And
I think
is that the ideal?
Yeah, and also it's the idea that really, like you know, bilingual estate agencies and Smart and everything, you know, we understand the process in France and we understand how things work in the UK, so we can explain to potential buyers what the differences are, what potential pitfalls there might be, or things that they're perhaps not expecting because they're only used to the English system, just explain the differences so that they're fully versed before they get kind of stuck into the transaction.
Okay, let's look at a typical scenario then. So someone goes out to France to look at properties. James finds them their dream home, negotiates an offer that's accepted. What's the next thing? Should they call you at that point? Is that when they get in contact with you? And
that's
I'm
what
presuming
I'd
they'll sign a deposit. Will they sign a reservation?
Well, I imagine that I'm sure James will go into this in more detail, but I imagine James would give them a document, a purchase offer document to sign for them and the sellers to sign together to show that they offer such and such a price for this property, you know, subject to these basic conditions. And then the seller will have to sign to accept that. And then probably in the document, there'll be some kind of deadline by when the preliminary contract should be signed between the parties, you know, and if for any reason that contract's not signed by that deadline, technically the seller can then be disengaged from selling to that buyer and the property can go back on the market unless the two parties negotiate an extension of time. So I would say that initial purchase offer document, even though it's not a contract, is still legally important. And it is a good idea that buyers, have a lawyer look at that, I think, before they sign it, really.
And then is that when
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, is that when the 10-day, there's a 10-day cooling off period, isn't there, in France?
Yes, so that comes a little bit later. So
okay.
What happens then is that potentially Beauvillage or the estate agency will prepare the preliminary contract, sale and purchase contract. It may be them or it may be the notaire in France that prepares it. It depends how each agency works. Once the parties have taken advice on that contract and they're happy to sign it, they sign the contract, and then the estate agency, if they drafted it, or the notaire, if they drafted it, will then send the buyer a copy of the signed contract. Most often these days that's done by a secure electronic email system. And then from the day after the buyer receives that copy of the signed contract, that's when their 10-day cooling off period starts. And it's 10 calendar days from that point. And they can then, in the unlikely event that they get cold feet or there's some reason why they no longer wish to proceed with the purchase, they can use that 10-day cooling off period to tell the buyer, sorry, but I no longer want to go ahead. And they will then recover any deposit that they've already paid. Although most often these days, the preliminary deposit is not payable until that 10 days expires anyway, because it just makes things administratively simpler for the estate agent or the notaire, because they don't then have to return the deposit if the buyer decides.
Is this all making sense, James? Is this how generally the process happened?
No, absolutely. I mean, basically, if the French system is simple in terms of the purchase process, but it can be complicated by things like Sally was saying, where things get complicated, it's to do with inheritance and how you buy a property, for example. That can be really important. So the kind of, if your situation is slightly complicated, especially in terms of inheritance, let's say, for example, you're a couple and you've got children from previous marriages and that kind of thing, how you buy a property is really important as to what happens in the future if you decide one day to sell it, or if one of you dies whilst you're owning the property, and what happens sort of and where the inheritance of that property goes. So a lot of people leave it till too late before they start thinking about asking these kind of questions, unfortunately. Whereas actually, if you are asking the right questions before you buy the property, you generally find that you avoid all the issues later on. Mm-hmm. that's kind of super important kind of thing to think about. I know it's sometimes quite morbid, those kind of questions, because it's generally the sort of things that you don't really want to think about, but actually it can be hugely important, because there are lots of different solutions available. And although a notaire is there from a legal point of view to help you with the purchase, they're not necessarily, they won't always go out their way to try and find you the best solution. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you need kind of independent advice, and that's a great time to do it, because once you get to the company de vente stage, which is the kind of preliminary sales agreement, once you're past that and the 10 days have gone and you paid your deposit, it's quite then hard to reissue that contract and change it before completion, because it obviously requires quite a lot of hard work. So if you can get that stuff sorted prior to the company de vente, it's a lot better. Okay, great, thank you.
So let's go back to the different steps. And so you've had the initial contract, and you've had the tooling off period has expired, and everything is moving forwards. What happens after that, Sally?
So at that point, if Beauvillage have prepared the first contract, they will then pass over the file to the notaire, the local notary in France, the lawyer, who will then start all the pre-completion searches that I was talking about before, contact the local authority and request a planning information notice to find out what planning rules apply to the area in which the property is situated. Contact anybody that might have a right of preemption over the purchase. In the meantime, you as a buyer will be, if you need a mortgage, you'll be contacting your bank and sending them a copy of that signed preliminary contract so that they can then progress with your mortgage application. And this whole period usually takes between about 2 to 3 months, I would say. And at the end of that period, that's when you're looking then to complete the transaction. And you will either be going to the notaire's office in person to sign the deed of sale, or if you are unable to travel to France for any reason, we can arrange with the notaire to prepare a French power of attorney that you would then sign in front of a local notary public in the UK near you, who would witness your signature. Get it all legalised, officialised, stamped, and then we return that to the notaire, and their office can then sign the contract on your behalf, the deed on your behalf. But I would say, and I'm sure James would say as well, that ideally, if you're buying a property in France, it's a really good idea to try and be there for completion, and go and visit the property again with your estate agent before completion, and just make sure that everything's in order. There've been no sort of incidents or anything that's affected the property since you last saw it that needs repairing, that all the furniture and things that's agreed in the sale is still present, that you've read the meters with the sellers and the estate agents and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And what's this? Is there a diagnostic pack as well they have in France that buyers, set of vendors have to prepare with their property? Because surveys are treated a bit differently, aren't they, over there?
Yes. So by law, a seller, when they present you with your draft preliminary contract, they also have to present you with a whole suite of diagnostic survey reports, like you say, relating to things like asbestos, internal electrics, gas, if the property has gas, termites, energy efficiency, drainage, if the property has an individual drainage system rather than being connected to the mains. So all those sort of things have to be supplied to you before you sign the preliminary contract. And then if you've got a lawyer involved like us, we would then review all of those with the contract, prepare a detailed written report on the contents, so that you know exactly what the state of play is. It's not very common in France to have a structural survey of the property done, because French people don't tend to do that when they're buying a property. But that's not to say you can't have one done. And there are, for example, British surveyors based in France whose job it is to go around and survey property, particularly for British people who are used to that kind of system and want a full survey. So that's something that can be arranged. And if people want that, I would recommend that be done before they sign that preliminary contract, so they know what they're getting into.
Yeah. That's the question that's just come in, actually. Is it advisable? I mean, because a lot of people buy older character homes, don't they? So what James, do many of your clients want surveys? Or, well, they're not surveys, are they? Well, they, as the French don't call them surveys, they're engineering reports. Or
yeah, I mean, the system's completely different. There's no body of of experts that call themselves surveyors that intervene for every property purchase. It just doesn't happen. The only times that our clients tend to use surveyors, they tend to be British surveyors that are based in France that can kind of intervene and do a report on the property. It's not a survey with the same kind of guarantees that you would get perhaps in the UK, but it is a report on the structure of the property. To be fair, we don't have that many. Most of the time, it generally tends to be what the kind of local French people do, which is if you've got concerns about a property, you generally get an artisan or a builder to go to the property and have a look over it and see what they think and give a kind of report back verbally to say nothing to worry about, or this needs redressing, or this needs help. And your estate agent would be able to point you in the direction of good, reputable local people that can do that for you. And you should have no fear about asking for that kind of service, because that really is one of the things that's important from a reassurance point of view, to make sure that what you're buying isn't going to, fall onto the ground the next day. Basically, it's sort of it's kind of a key criteria. You can have a survey if you want one. It's not the norm, but you certainly, if you have issues with structural kind of elements of the building, then definitely get a local artisan to come and have a look at it for you.
Yeah. So that's where good local knowledge about local building materials, local building styles, it's really get from experienced people. Sorry, Sally. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say that sounds really, really sensible, and it's entirely a personal decision, isn't it? So if in the UK you wouldn't buy a property without having some kind of builder or artisan or surveyor go around and give you some reassurance, then feel free to do the same thing in France. And as James said, if you've got a particular concern about property, then again, it's a good idea to do it at the outset.
Okay, thank you. So completion has happened. Process from making an offer to completion, you said, it's about 3 months at the moment.
Well, I would say process from having signed that first contract to completion.
First contract.
Yeah. So it can take a little bit longer, because if you want someone to review the contract first, that takes a bit of time as well. And
there are costs on top of your agreed purchase price. Can you just outline what they are so people can have an idea of what they need to budget?
Yes. So the agreed purchase price, I believe I'm right in saying, James, would normally include the estate agent's commission. Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got to pay notaires fees, which include also the stamp duty, registration taxes due in France by a buyer. You're looking generally at about 7 to 8% of the purchase price for all of that. So the majority of that is actually the stamp duty, which is in most areas of France is 5.8% at the present time. In a few areas it's reduced to 5, but generally it's 5.8. And then the balance is notaires fees, including VAT, their disbursements, so local property, local planning search fees and that sort of thing. So that's the extra you can expect. And then if you do decide to instruct a UK firm of solicitors to assist you as well, then there'll be our fees. I can't tell you exactly how much they would be, because we offer a time basis estimate. So we'll have a look at the kind of property the client is buying, the conditions of purchase, that sort of thing, estimate how long we think it will take us to review, to act for you for the whole transaction, and let you know. But generally speaking, our fees are unlikely to be less than about £6,000 plus VAT.
Okay. Thanks very much. We've got a question about the notaires fees from Tony. Are they negotiable, or are they set by the government? The notaires fees?
No, then they're not negotiable, Tony. No, they are, as you say, they're set by the government. It's a fixed scale, and they can't change, because, as I say, the majority of it is the stamp duty anyway. And the rest, it's a fixed scale, so they can't negotiate that.
Okay, thanks very much, Sally. I will just say, actually, we've got another session dedicated to the more legal stuff on the buying process. I think that's at 2:00. So, and there'll be a presentation. So, anyone watching now, if you want to learn more about that side of things, then join us at 2:00. But let's go back to James. James, you said Beauvillage. You're based mainly in the southwest. Where are your key markets at the moment? Which areas are where the company is selling most at the moment?
I mean, traditionally, the sort of the hot areas in the southwest of France have been the Dordogne, the Lot, those kind of areas around here. And then over time, what's happened is that the the kind of the interest has grown in different areas. So now up here in the Poitou-Charentes, which is basically sort of just inland from La Rochelle, the property market with kind of international buyers is really quite hot at the minute. There's a lot of interest in it, lots of people talking about it. Same slightly even further inland in Haute-Vienne, that's an area that's really on the up as well.
What is it about these areas you think that's making them? I mean, I know
there's a couple of things really. I mean, basically, generally speaking, the southwest of France, in terms of weather, is fantastic. You know, you've got lots of sunshine, nice warm clement temperatures, which is really important. The reason why I would say the newer areas are coming on leaps and bounds is probably because you've got great accessibility to, you know, the UK, for example, in terms of airports, high-speed train, even driving-wise. I mean, to get to where we are, you know, if you're probably 4.5 hours from Caen, ferry port, or just over 7 hours from Calais, it's doable in a day. The further south you go, the longer it takes, basically. But also, you know, things like proximity to the coast. The Atlantic coast is really popular. You know, we're not too far away. But really, the thing I'd say probably that drives it more than anything is property prices, because in our area, you can just get such kind of high value for money based compared to, well, the UK especially, but certainly based up the areas of France. So yeah, I mean, you get a lot for your money in these areas that are kind of up and coming. And what we're also finding is that more and more people are moving within France to these areas. So they're selling up, for example, on the Côte d'Azur in the south coast, and moving where it's a little bit quieter, a little bit cooler, maybe in the summertime. Real mix, basically. So you know, Charentes, the Deux-Sèvres, the Vienne, Haute-Vienne are really kind of on the up. But also we're getting loads of interest at the minute in the sort of area around about Carcassonne, the Languedoc and Limoux, that kind of area. That's really, you know, we're getting lots and lots of people looking at that area at the minute, which is definitely kind of on the up. Generally more kind of holiday homes rather than permanent moves, but a bit of both.
Because that's further south, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So if I had to pick out the sort of two real kind of up and coming areas, I'd say they're the ones that stand out at the moment.
In fact, Tony asked us another question. He said, which would you consider, which areas in France the most inexpensive or cost effective? I guess value for money as well.
Yeah, value for money. I mean, generally speaking, the more rural you go in France, in normal circumstances, the lower the price. So the more you head into the centre of France, generally speaking, the prices go down a little bit. The more you head to the south of France, the prices will go up. You know, will obviously increase. It's just a kind of, you know, demand thing. Same in the big cities. You know, cost is kind of significantly more than the countryside. I suppose what you need to do is focus not just on the price, but actually what the area gives to you. Because it's all right saying I can buy a cheap house, but if you've got to get in the car and drive 40 minutes to get to the nearest supermarket, that's kind of quite cute and quaint for the first few months, but after a while it starts to get a little bit sort of, you know. So I think the key thing is decide on what you need from your area and focus on that area rather than just thinking about kind of, you know, where can I get the best value for money, because often there's a reason why property is cheaper in certain areas.
Yeah, it's still the sort of dream location when clients come to you. It's, I want to be walking distance of a bakery, a bar, and a, you know, a little square. I want that all on my doorstep, and I want the views. You know, half an acre of land with is that sort of the dream home still?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, when I first started, so back in 2007, that was kind of what we found was that at that time people wanted no neighbours, space, didn't want to be kind of, you know, overlooked, and they wanted to be kind of completely sort of on their own. Then there's this big kind of swing back towards, I want to be in a village within walking distance to a bakery, to a bar, and that kind of thing. The problem is that if that's your key criteria, generally what happens, it means that you're in a village, and when you're in a village, you're generally buying a village property, which is not the same type of property as you would necessarily buy if you're in a kind of hamlet around that village, if you understand what I mean. So generally in a village, it's quite hard to find completely detached houses in the middle of their own land with kind of, you know, half an acre and beautiful and uninterrupted views. The simple reason being is because you're in a village, you know, you're actually kind of, you know, within proximity of other houses. So really, in terms of criteria, I would say when people are looking, what you need to do is you need to really mark down what are the most important things for you, and focus on that. Because if being walking distance to a bakery and a bar are your key criteria, then your focus should be uniquely on properties that are within villages, you know, some I mean, or towns.
Yeah.
If you're open to that, and you're actually, what you really want is something more about the property itself. I want to be, you know, sort of detached in my own land, overlooking open fields, that kind of thing. Then, you know, there might be one odd property that sort of hits that criteria in both ways, but it's quite rare. So it's really about kind of prioritizing what are the most important things for you and focusing your search on that, you know. And that's the hard thing, really, because I mean, the area we cover in the southwest of France is bigger than the UK. So, you know, and often we get clients saying, you know, well, I'm not really sure about areas. I want to look in the Charente, but I'm also interested in the Languedoc. And you think, well, it's kind of like saying, well, I might buy a house in Dover, but I might buy one in Aberdeen. It's sort of that sort of, you know, and that's the key thing really is knowing the area you want to be in, what that area gives you, and then really focusing your attention on that area, because that's the kind of key way that you're going to get what you need, because the property needs to work for you, but the area has to work for you too. And if you get both together, that's where you really make a success of it, I think.
Yeah, no. And in terms of actual, let's look at some numbers now in terms of prices. So let's talk about the Charente, because we've said it's popular. You're there. What are people spending, or what do they need to spend at the moment if they want to get, I don't know, the Longère, the converted barn with an acre of land, say? What sort of prices are we looking at?
I mean, to give you an idea, I mean, literally this morning before I came on a call, we signed a mandate for a Longère, detached garage, about half an acre of garden, 3/4 bedrooms, ready to move into, and that's going on the market for just under 200,000 euros. Wow, so okay. You know, you can get quite a lot for your money. If you want sort of swimming pools or gîtes and that kind of thing, then generally in our area you need to be thinking more sort of 250 upwards. If you're looking for kind of, you know, bigger equestrian properties and that kind of thing, then yeah, 450 upwards probably. But you can still buy renovation projects around our area for, you know, 40, 50,000 euros. We have one accepted this morning at 40k. You know, it's still doable, and I suppose it depends on what you're looking for, really.
And a village house, I see some quite nice, I think they call them mairies, the old mayor, sort of more formal looking.
The maison de maître, they're kind of very symmetrical.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, in the villages and small towns.
Yeah, you can still get. They're very popular, actually. It's a style of property that really appeals to British buyers. Actually, I think we quite like the symmetry of the look of them, actually, and you can pick them up. The ones that are kind of completely renovated, they generally tend to be quite big houses. They tend to be 4, 5, 6 often bedrooms, and you can probably pay, I don't know, anywhere from sort of 250 up to 450, 500 in our area. But you can still get them, smaller ones in villages, actually a lot cheaper than that. We sold one recently about 140, I think it was, which needed a bit of refreshing, but it was still pretty nice inside. So they are findable.
Okay. And how you actually find properties for your clients. Let's talk about viewing trips, because that's a critical part of the process. So hopefully, you know, after an event like today, the next step might be to come out and visit you in Charente and Ruffec. What will be a typical process? How will you do it? How many days will it be? How many properties would you normally show people? Just talk us through the typical viewing trip so people know what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, if you're coming from abroad, you tend to be looking, you probably within kind of, you know, at least a week, if not 2 weeks of kind of looking and viewing, especially if you know where what your area you're focusing on is. I would advise you kind of, you know, take a week at least, book in to see probably no more than 4 or 5 properties per day. Any more than that, I think, is just too many. You just get confused and you mix up, you know, which garden was that and which bedroom was that, and it's just impossible. But the most important thing really is, before you come out, talk on the phone, preferably to your agent, because actually sometimes just by talking and going through your criteria and what you're looking for, an agent will be able to discern a couple of things. One being that actually there might be new properties coming on the market which you've not seen yet because they're brand new coming on and you don't know about them yet. And he might be able to, or he or she might be able to point me in the direction of these new properties coming on. And second, it's about criteria, because sometimes you'll discount properties that you'll have seen on the internet because of they're not walking distance to a bar, for example, which we talked about before. But actually, they might fit 99% of the other criteria that you've got, and actually are worth looking at. So talk to your agent, be very specific about what you want, what your criteria are, and don't just focus on the properties that you've seen that you might want to view, but also ask your agent, do you think there's any other properties either live or about to go live which you think are worth looking at? Because you'll be amazed how many times it's the properties that you've not thought about or brand new on the market that the ones people end up buying.
And this is probably a key thing, the difference between buying in the UK or your country, you know, where you will look at the properties and it's almost incidental who the agent is. Whereas buying in France, it's your agent is you know, that's generally who's going to find your property. It's a different relationship, isn't it? And so that as soon as you understand what they want, you can go and find what they want.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different relationship to the point where, you know, when you're an agent and dealing with international buyers, you are the point of contact often for those clients in that area. So not only are you there to help find them property, but you're there to give them all sorts of different advice on all elements of their kind of new life that they're planning in France. So it's much deeper relationship than you would just find by, you know, open the door to a house and saying, you know, do you like it or not? It tends to be a lot deeper relationship, but also one that lasts a long time. And I still get people that bought houses from me 16 years ago calling me up saying, I need an emergency dentist, or my dog's ill, where do I go? And you kind of, they just last because people know you and you're kind of well known within your area. So they come back to you because you're the point of contact for lots of different information. And also, you know, use your agent to find things out, because if you want to know about an area, nothing better than asking tons of questions to an agent about it, because they live in those areas, they know people, you know, they know what to do, things to see, what kind of clubs and associations there might be in those kind of areas that you might be interested in going forward. An agent is a source of information about all kinds of different things, so make the most of them, you know.
Okay. Time's ticking away, and we've actually got some more questions in, so let's address those. First one, are notaires fees ever included in the published selling price? Notaires fees? Not normally. The legal obligation is for estate agency fees to be advertised within the price that you see advertised, but not some companies will put notaires fees included, but often it's mainly just agency fees that are included. Okay, so yeah, I think they might be confusing it with the agency fees thing. Yeah. If it is an agency, there's a legal obligation to advertise the price with the agency fees included. You can't just with it included. Will they sometimes itemise that and say this is the price and this is our fees, or will it just be one price? Very quickly, just advice for clients looking. There's two ways of advertising a property in France. You either get the fees paid for by the vendor, the seller, or you get the fees paid for by the buyer. If the property you're looking at is fees paid for by the buyer, both advertised prices will include the agency fees anyway. But if it's the buyer that's paying the fees, you have to legally break down the net price, the agency fees, and the percentage. It's a legal obligation. So that's why sometimes you look at two properties online, and the actual advert won't seem the same, because one will actually just have a fees including a vendor price, vendor for agency fees, and some will be a buyer one, and that's why. Okay, you just answered another question. Actually, I'm confused about who. Oh, they've asked what the cost is. What is an approximate cost for agency fees? Can you answer that? Yeah, I mean, basically, it's in France we have what's called a barème. We have to publish our prices, and it's by the kind of I think in French, and I forget the English words sometimes. By the sort of each bracket of a property price, you end up having a different percentage. So it starts it goes from about 5% all the way up to over 10% for the lowest properties. And then there's also most agencies have a minimum fee. So if you get under a certain amount, you basically pay a minimum fee, which is a fixed fee. That's pretty much how it works. Okay, thank you. Question here from Sue. think maybe one for you, Sally. She's trying to buy in the Carcassonne area, but every time she sees a property, before she can get out to see it, it's sold. Obviously, it is a very hot market right now. So this is just backing out what James has said. So she's trying to work out a strategy to secure a property in time. Should I offer and withdraw in the 10-day cooling off period? So just make an offer and then you've got your 10 days to withdraw it if you don't like it. I think that's what she's saying. It doesn't feel right, but she's not sure how to get there in time and beat the other buyers, basically.
That might be more a question for James, I would think.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'll let James answer that one.
Only thing you can do is really get to know in detail the agent in the area, because you need to be the first person they call when they've got a new property coming on, rather than seeing it online, because often it's too late. The amount of properties at the minute which are selling before they go live on websites is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. So really focus on your relationship with the agent. Make sure you're the first person they ring when the new property comes on, and that's how you get ahead. I wouldn't advise blind offers and putting out in 10-day cooling off period, because generally speaking, a vendor really will only want to accept an offer if someone's come and looked at their house, because otherwise it just becomes a little bit kind of, a little bit sort of too easy, I think. Build a relationship with the agent.
Yeah, you'll get sussed out pretty quick if you keep doing that. And another one, this is to do with, I haven't heard about this, but it's the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, something that's coming in, implemented. So the question is, how do you gauge the financial risk of this? Is it going to have an effect on the market, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive? Whoever wants to answer that. Or both.
I'm not sure if they're referring to potentially that from the 1st of April this year, if you're selling a property where its energy efficiency is category F, I think it is, or below, because properties are sort of categorized on a scale of how energy efficient they are and how much greenhouse gas they emit, starting at A, which is obviously ideal, and then G, which is the lowest. And from the 1st of April this year, those properties that are F or below, the seller will have to provide an energy audit, won't he, James, to the buyer to let them see what the sort of the state of the property energy-wise is, and the person that does the audit will give some recommendations as to the kind of work that needs doing to bring up the property to at least a level E or above. So sorry, what was the question?
Really, what the implications might be on prices on the market, or just generally?
Well, that might be a bit more for James, but it's just in the sense that
that's what's happening, though.
If that's the kind of property you're looking at buying, the seller will have to provide you with that audit so that you're fully versed on the whole situation and you know what potential costs you'll have in the future to bring to a.
Okay, well, that's what he's now just asked. Yes, how likely is it that I would have to do costly renovations? So I'm guessing if they're selling a property and it's now an F or a G, or you're buying one that's an F, are you going to be forced to bring it up to an E, or what's the situation?
Shall I go, Sally? I mean, basically, the energy audit is brought in to try and bring the energy efficiency of French properties up. So the idea being is that the government really want properties to be more energy efficient. The energy audit you get is a series of recommendations for how you can improve the energy efficiency of the property. So the vendor will provide it to you if this property is an F or G, and you as a buyer have access to it and can read through it and have a rough idea of what things might cost in terms of insulation of the walls, insulation of the roof, double glazing, that kind of thing. However, there's no obligation as such when you buy the property to have these things done. It's not the same, for example, as a non-conforming septic tank where you have 12 months to put it right. It's a different thing. It's a document which basically gives you advice on the kind of work you probably want to do anyway, because if you are an F or a G, you're going to be spending quite a lot of money out on energy costs. But it gives you a rough idea of what they might actually cost. So it's going to be quite good from a buyer's point of view, because you kind of have a rough idea of what those kind of energy improving renovations are going to cost, more or less. Obviously it can be varied, but it's quite a good document. The reason there's lots of talk about it in terms of having an effect on house prices is mainly to do with properties that are used for rental purposes, buildings, and actually there's a new directive coming in that going forward, you will no longer be able to rent properties that are, F or G. And that then requires the landlord to then spend money to do the works in order to carry on renting it. That's a different thing, though. It's a different kind of client base, but that's more where the talk is coming from.
Brilliant, thank you. It's like the EPC rules in the UK. Then we have that already, don't we? You have to have an EPC when you sell or rent a property, and I think you need a minimum now for rented properties as well. Great. We're actually right out of time now. We're on the hour mark, so thanks for the questions. And like I said, it's been recorded, so you can revisit the session on the Your Overseas Home website. I think on Monday it's going up, but just keep checking. Thank you very much, Sally, James, and Paul. Appreciate your time and sharing all your knowledge and experience. Paul, obviously, your Smart Currency Exchange. James, Beauvillage Immobilier, and Sally, Buckle Solicitors. Each has got booths in the main exhibition hall, so you can go and grab them on there if you want to ask further questions, find anything else out, or take your property purchase to the next stage. What else have we got for France today? Like I said earlier, 2 o'clock, we have a dedicated half-hour session just on the more detailed legal aspects of purchasing in France, and that's one of Sally's colleagues from Buckles. I believe it's not you doing it, Sally.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's Leah, who's French. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it from us. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck with your plans to buy in France. Enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.